The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Blessings, everyone. It's Jesse, and welcome to another episode of the Pantsula Podcast. I'm here with my comrades Evan and Sadiq, and our comrade Marty, who is joining us. And we are here with the Kazi Circle of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. For those who do not know, the A-APRP was founded by Kwame Ture, and the objective is Pan-Africanism, which is the total liberation of Africa under scientific socialism. And we are talking about the Lumpen-Proletariat today. It's going to be an exciting conversation. But before we get into that, I'm going to pass it over to my comrade Sadiq, who will get into the ancestors who we honor today.
All right. So as y'all know, every episode, as just stated, we like to honor each episode of two of our ancestors, one of them being Albert Noah Washington, who is a political prisoner who was part of the Black Panther Party as well. He was actually captured with Jalil Abdul Mutulu, who was actually released a few years ago, who was also a political prisoner. He was charged with allegedly killing two New York City police officers with him. He dedicated his life to the struggle and Black liberation. So that's the first one. Second one being Storm de la Louvere. Also, he was also an LGBT activist, gay rights activist, essentially in the 50s and 60s. You know, we like to commemorate all the work and struggle he's had too as well. And then I'll go ahead and like to introduce our guests and get this episode started.
So we're here with Marty White from the Black Internationalist. If you want to just give a general intro to the work you've been doing and what brought you to just the work that you're doing for our people's struggle.
All right, so my name is Marte. I on YouTube and things like that, I go by the Black Internationalist. I am part of Community Movement Builders and the Spirit of Mandela campaign. Basically, all of my work is dedicated towards the liberation of captive African people within the United States, and also towards socialism. And what basically brought me to the work that I do today is just a lot of study, kind of getting to the place where I could understand the conditions that not only our people face, but also the conditions that characterize the world today under the capitalist system. After understanding that, it made me kind of realize that it was necessary for me to do as much as I could in order to contribute to this struggle. And the rest is history. It's just like it's required a lot of organizing, a lot of political work, a lot of consistent engagement with revolutionary theory. And it's been fulfilling and important to do so. So I'm glad to be here. And yeah.
Glad to have you. I was on mute talking to myself. Glad to have you here. So I know this episode is centered around the Lumpen-Proletariat. If you could kind of just give our viewers a general overview on how you guys define what is a Lumpen-Proletariat, just as a basis, and the work that you do around the Lumpen-Proletariat, essentially.
So basically, the Lumpen-Proletariat are like catch-all strata, various different sectors of the general populace that is maybe different than many of the other classes that exist in society, and that they're not characterized just by one relationship to the prevailing mode of production, but by a really, really broad category of being forced out of like a legal relationship to productive social relations. So it's just like, so Lumpen can include a lot of different groups of people. It can include people who have to sell dope to survive, people who have to sell themselves to survive. It can include people who who, you know what I'm saying, are houseless people who can't, you know what I'm saying, really afford, you know what I'm saying, a place to be, and also have to get, you know, saying help from other people in order to survive. It can include a lot of different groups of people, but what characterizes all of them is that they do not have the normal or the regular proletarian relationship to the broader workings of capitalist society. As far as work surrounding the Lumpen-Proletariat goes, it really depends. In previous organizations that I've worked with, I should say the Lumpen were a big focus for us, right? So that involved establishing a relationship with ex-gangbanging folks in the Atlanta area, and involved working with houseless people, and involved a lot of stuff like that, right? And trying to, you know what I'm saying, do what we could in order to bring to light the conditions that brought people into the situation that they're in, and also to work toward a better situation, both for the Lumpen proletariat and for all colonized and oppressed people on Turtle Island through political struggle. And so right now, I work with community movement builders, and in our situation, you know, we do exist in an area where there is like a strong like Lumpen-Proletarian population. And so, but as far as like working towards a better situation right now, what we're trying to do is create a new type of situation in the hood in which we work, based off of solidarity, based off of Black power, based off of socialistic and revolutionary ideals that creates a better situation for everybody there, which would include the Lumpen. So that's basically what we do.
Thank you so much for giving that lowdown on that. When I was researching for this first talk, I noticed that they mentioned underclass in regards to it. Do you see any difference between the Lumpen-Proletariat and underclass? Do you see this one the same, or is there some difference between those two terms?
From my understanding of the term underclass, I feel like it would include like a lot. Like I feel like the Lumpen are a part of the underclass, but maybe are not necessarily the only part of it, because there are a lot. Because underclass to me means like all of the lower classes, or the classes exploited or oppressed by capitalism, that don't necessarily fall into the category of proletarian. So there's also semi-proletarians that exist, other strata that may not necessarily be the Lumpen-Proletariat, but also make up the broad popular masses of people, and therefore could be considered part of the underclass. But, you know, other people might have different perspectives. That's just the way that I understand the term.
And also, I think, speaking to the point of the underclass, in my limited reading of Mao Zedong, reading about one of the things he emphasized was distinguishing between friends and enemies. And I think, you know, working with the Lumpen, you got folks that are the underclass, folks that are essentially seen as the strays of the world because of the participation of the work that they're doing, you know, selling drugs or selling their body. And obviously these bring contradictions. Can maybe you speak to some of the experiences you've witnessed dealing with folks that deal with the same oppressor? Obviously, us working, we have capitalism beating our necks, and it creates this insight that, oh, well, I'm not on the street, so I don't have it as bad. But, you know, when you talk to folks who are living in these circumstances, you figure out those situations intersect. So what have been some of your experiences? Just curious to the listeners out there that wouldn't even dare to talk to someone who's possibly selling drugs or out there doing something that is seen as quote unquote bad. Like, how are those relationships exposed to interlinkings of capitalism?
One thing that I think is really worth it to know is that like the activities of many members of the Lumpen-Proletariat, they're activities that like might be something that, you know what I'm saying, they would engage in at one point if like necessary, right? It's just like, but if the situation changes, these same people might decide not to do that anymore, you know what I'm saying, because of just like a change in conditions, or a change in the way that they exist, or even sometimes a change of heart and a consideration of kind of the broader situation, right? So for example, there was a couple of houseless people that one of my previous organizations worked with, right? And one of them we worked with quite a lot. We talked to him a whole lot about his backstory and the things that he had been through. And he had to really like have that internal struggle about whether or not he was going to go back to robbing people, going back to trying to get his money or what he would need to survive through, you know, basically through those means, or whether he was going to decide not to do that. Right. And he had to like have that internal struggle on whether or not he wanted to go that route. But the thing is, like, either way, like, it didn't necessarily change whether or not he was like an immiserated person. Right. It's just like his conditions were still horrible either way. It's just like, but it really just, you know what I'm saying, was that internal struggle that he had to go through. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people would see that as just being like, it's just like, or him like having that kind of condition as being something that's just inherently bad, but they won't look at the conditions that caused him to go there. Another person in this organization we established relations with was a man by the name of Brother Haroon. And his whole goal was to kind of stop the conflict that existed in the hood in which he lived, which is sort of close to where a lot of the political work that I do occurs, but not the same neighborhood. It was a very, very violent community where there was a lot of conflict between street organizations. And just to be clear, this is important for me to establish for the rest of this conversation. I'm not going to call these organizations gangs. James Jackie Sales and a lot of other New African revolutionaries did not use those terms because it takes away from the understanding of these as actual organizations, right? But it was conflict between street organizations that existed in this hood. And he did a lot. He actually got it so that it wasn't like a neighborhood that was constantly basically at war with itself. But he, you know, started as a GD, actually came under the influence of the former Black Panther, Jamil Al-Amin, I believe. He became a Muslim, and he decided that he was going to do his best to try to, I guess, repair the damage that was done in the community. And I mean, there were limitations to the work that he engaged in, and we engaged like politically with him. He told us about how he would, how his organization that he started would, you know, I'm saying, kind of protect the children in the neighborhood, make sure that like people didn't fall down the path that he ended up being in, and a lot of things like that. He was really trying to work towards bettering the community. Unfortunately, he's passed now. But it's a good example of that internal struggle that exists in many members of the Lumpen-Proletariat. And it shows that there are multiple different paths that Lumpen can go down. And it really just depends on the situation, you know what I'm saying, which path they end up taking.
What do you find to be like some of the main issues or difficulties in trying to organize the proletariat?
I think that it has to do, like, the main issues or difficulties that I've experienced personally kind of have to do with like trying to actually or the what's the term I'm looking for? Like the insecurity of the conditions that they're in, right? It's just like it's not something that is easy to kind of like pull people out of. It's just like with people like Haroon, like already that process had occurred. Kind of, you know, Haroon, you know, had like a situation that was like stable enough for him to be able to do political work in his own right. But for other people, like the brother that I was talking about earlier, right? It's just like, it was not easy to be able to, you know what I'm saying? We couldn't really like pull him out of that situation because we didn't even like have really the capacity to be able to do that. That was the organization before I was part of Community Movement Builders, which is a lot bigger and has a lot more capacity to do stuff for people, right? It's just like in this situation, it wasn't necessarily something that we even had the capacity to do. And then on top of that, there was the conditions that were, you know what I'm saying, just kind of excruciating for him and a lot of the other folks that we encountered, you know what I'm saying, in that area. And it ended up, you know what I'm saying, being something that was a revelation of sorts, you know what I'm saying, to us, because it kind of showed how difficult the situation is for the broad masses of people, especially our people on the streets of Atlanta. So, you know what I'm saying? It's that is the most difficult type of situation. But again, I feel like it's necessary to understand that with this particular sector of the people, like in America, like a lot of the people, even people who go to work every day to make their, you know what I'm saying, the money that they need, you know what I'm saying, are living in conditions that are better than a lot of the people around the world. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, especially in countries that have produced revolutions, right? And so it's just like, and there was a certain level of consciousness that we saw among some of these most immiserated people, because there is a connection to the social being that someone is in and the consciousness that a person has, right? And so understanding this, like, it's just like, I mean, this is the opposite of a problem, because it's just like this kind of showed that it's just like the revolutionary potential that existed within that type of situation. We're able to mobilize some of these people to come with us in doing certain levels of political work. And also in order to kind of confront, like in Atlanta, we have these people that harass like houseless people called the ambassadors, right? That came into being during the Olympics because they were trying to clean up the streets or whatever. They failed. You know what I'm saying? But it's just like they were doing that to like to as their like ridiculous solution to the conditions that people were in the city. And they are still there. They never left. And they're like a private security company. It's really weird, but there's something like that. And
I'm sure they have connection to the state, right? The police.
Yes. And they enforce city ordinances, basically. Yeah. And so we were able to mobilize some of, you know what I'm saying, the houseless people in that area against this, like at least one of the ambassadors were able to corner him and like question him. And it's just like, ask him why are you doing this? Like, why are you like waking people up? It's just like that are trying to sleep. When you see that these people are sleeping on the street, you don't help them. All you do is attack and harass them. It's just like, and he was just like, well, you don't want like, houseless people or homeless people on your street. You don't do it. And we were, you know, in front of like, you know what I'm saying, these people who are in this condition. He said this, like, it's just like it was like fine. We were able to like kind of get people involved to a degree in some of this work. But again, like it was not an easy task. And not only was it not an easy task, but there's only so much we even achieved when it came to that. So that's, you know, worth mentioning.
Yeah. And to go along with that, as when I was watching your video about the Mao's perspective on the role of the lumpen, and there's another point you talked about the lumpen or the dangerous class, and with regards to this with regards to organizing or just the masses of people, there's always that stigma towards them, and to talk more about how that's been manifest and also how ways of people who are organizing, they like, for example, like a lot of people, they idolize the Black Panther Party, for example, but at the same time, they don't realize like the extent of where that organized Lumpen-Proletariat both aided in their struggle, as well as some of the ways that the contradictions led to, of course, along with the COINTELPRO, led to some of this downfall. Could you talk more about how people can understand those contradictions?
Right. So first of all, like a lot of people like to kind of stand the Black Panther Party, right, and talk about, oh man, I love the Black Panther Party because they were socialists that like took up arms and they were black, and that's so cool. Like, it's just like, especially like white leftists, and then they all like use like certain stuff that certain Black Panthers said for their own ends and to justify whatever viewpoint they have, without really looking at what they did. One of the things that was an innovation of the Black Panther Party, and this is not something that I don't think that they really invented as far as theory goes, but I think that as far as praxis goes, they actually were able to pull it off, which is organizing the lumpen, mobilizing the brothers on the street. They were able to actually do this, and they were able to pull in a lot of folks who were banging, a lot of people who, who were basically part of this lowest strata of society. And I think it did a lot for the militancy of the organization, and a lot for the danger of the organization to the settler colonial capitalist state. However, it wasn't all, sunshine and rainbows, because it's just like there was also Lumpen-Proletariat tendencies that existed, that were not necessarily beneficial to the organization as a whole. There was, I mean, you could argue that it's just like a lot of the beef that proliferated throughout the organization could be considered a reflection of Lumpen-Proletarian tendencies. You could argue that, a lot of the situations, like there were situations of like sticking up stores, of things like that. A lot of things that happened that probably weren't the best thing to happen. Yeah. But, they occurred. And that just kind of goes to show, I think that like with any kind of revolutionary strategy or tactics, there's going to be, like, if you do something new, there's going to be some like huge benefits, and there's going to be some problems. And every single time you do something new, there's going to be new problems and new benefits. And it's just always like that. So, those were the issues that arose from that. And sometimes people would look out for themselves, and even work with the feds, as opposed to recognizing that, this is a party that has been organized to liberate our people, and that, we need to think collectively, and that could be considered a Lumpen-Proletarian tendency. And then, there's even like elements that over time ended up kind of like degenerating a bit into being something other than, what it was originally. Like, the Black guerrilla family was supposed to be kind of like an armed wing of the Panthers in a way. And it's not quite what it used to be. So there's that too, but I don't think that necessarily takes away from the benefit of them being able to do that. It's just a problem that needed to be solved, and the party ended up getting destroyed. They didn't have an opportunity to really try to like completely overcome that. So I think that's worth knowing too.
Yeah, just hearing you say that reminded me also to Miles' point about them needing instruction, because when you're working with these folks, you're dealing with folks that have seen just the dirtiest, heaviest foot against their neck. So they have a little bit more of a reactionary response. And I think that also highlights the need for political education and making sure that there is a constant political education program, because if folks are not understanding what the system is, they're going to easily be bought out by it. As you mentioned with the Black Panther Party, we know the CIA was heavily involved, being able to pay people off, sell information, sabotage. All of these type of tactics are done. And I think, political education is so necessary. Without having an analysis, without understanding the dialectics of any situation, you're easily more led to just be caught. And I think a lot of folks just undermine the importance of political education because reading is obviously scolded. People think that if you're reading or if you're aware, you're somehow better. But no, you need to be informed, because this system of capitalism has been doing this thing for a long time, and it is aware of the necessity of, ideological confusion is the main weapon, I would say one of the main weapons to use against the masses, because if you get people to focus on these smaller issues, to not organize, but to just be instead in reactionary, mobilized situations, then yeah, you're more liable to fall. So I think those were good points you made. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, is there typical, like, from all, because I know you probably hear a lot of criticism from all sides. So I guess if you want to, like, kind of lay out what some of those criticism are, whether you hear from the bourgeoisie, the working class, maybe even amongst other organizers and, you know, even reactionaries, essentially, maybe lay out some of those standard critiques you hear and how you guys, you know, combat those critiques.
So there's a lot of different things. Like, I mean, from like other people who claim like communism or like scientific socialism or anything like that, you hear like, well, it's like the proletariat, like it's just like that Lumpen are the enemy of the proletariat or whatever. And it's just like, it's honestly just like a lazy, dogmatic position that isn't even in line with the perspectives of like revolutionary thinkers like Mao or the actual praxis of those people. It's like, and so it's, you know, I respond and I'm just like, well, it's just like this is what happened during like the Chinese Revolution when it came to the Lumpen. This is like what Mao said about it. That's like, I'm giving you this. I'm just like, I do think that like the position on it has a little bit like changed over time, you know, throughout the years of scientific socialist thinkers. Here's the problems that can come from it. It's just like the benefits that can come from organizing the Lumpen-Proletariat. Here's what Fanon said about it. Here's what, you know what I'm saying? I can do that, but like sometimes that stuff doesn't even necessarily warrant response because it's just like, it's again, just lazy. One thing that I think is super important is to talk about reactionary perspectives. You know what I'm saying? Like, because like, for example, here we've like ran into reactionary politicians who use their you know what I'm saying? Oh man, look at this guy like shot up this or that area in Atlanta, and that means that like it's okay for us to call for more cops, and it's okay for me to be friends with the Atlanta Police Department. I want to go and destroy all of the quote unquote gangs. It's just like riding with the Atlanta Police Department and stuff like that. Atlanta politicians would be like that, and that I think that is the dangerous type of thing, because that person has power, right? It's just like, so it's like, you know what I'm saying? Trying to explain, like, it's just like that, you know what I'm saying? That, that police are not the solution to, you know what I'm saying? People having to engage in the illegal economy in order to survive. I mean, it's impossible really for these people, because they're the class understanding that they actually have, the class alignment that they have is an enemy class alignment. They do despise all people that are part of both the underclass and the working class. It's just like, it's not necessarily possible to try to convince them otherwise, because that's their role in society, to be part of the apparatus of the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. However, exposing them, especially in front of a bunch of people, you know what I'm saying? Always worth it. Always worth it. You know what I'm saying? Criticizing them, showing them that other Black folks don't agree with this and are not okay with this. And then, of course, we have like people, like I mentioned, the ambassador, people like that. It's just like who really do think that they are doing the right thing by harassing and attacking houseless people. It's like, and I mean, and I think that bringing houseless people in front of them, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, kind of giving them a taste of their own medicine, you know what I'm saying? Surrounding them and arguing against them, you know what I'm saying? It's just like criticizing them, showing them that what they're doing is not right and that it's unacceptable. You know what I'm saying? It might not stop them from being able to do what they're trying to do, but hopefully it sows the seed of the idea that what they're doing is not acceptable, and what they're doing is wrong, and that people do not agree with it and do not think that it's okay. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of different angles through which people have a tendency to criticize and attack, you know what I'm saying, on the basis of trying to organize some of the lowest and most immiserated people in our society, especially when they're people that look like us. But it's just, I mean, it's just part of it. You know what I'm saying? It's just part of the struggle.
Indeed. And I hear quite a bit of these sort of the status quo support, especially with our new mayor and Eric Adams. He's going to be like I hear Comrade Marte call him Black Giuliani, basically. They're like trying to clear out the subways and all this stuff about gun violence and so forth. And it says a lot when even people who like they use them about how like even like the fact that working people are exploited, they too take on those bourgeois ideologies of like all these like welfare people, all these house people, all these gang hangers and prostitutes, all that. They're just taking my money. Like I worked hard. I worked too hard for this.
Yeah.
And, it just there's a lot like not only like understanding how to like make sure that they're getting their material needs, but also that people who are working class that realize that they're even if they have had incidents like random violence and anti-people violence, that it's a system that's doing it. It's not some like some crazy person did this or mama didn't raise them right or anything like that. It's part of the system. And speaking of which, another thing I was thinking about was we talked about the Lumpen here in the United States. I know you also mentioned Fanon. How can this also apply for Lumpen, not just here in like in the core, but also in the global South?
So, you guys saw my video, and my video like really was focused on the imperial core for the reason that I think that there is kind of almost an added benefit to organizing the Lumpen here because of the fact that like the difference in conditions that like most people have between here and the global South, right? It's just like, so I think that always as communists, we need to go lower and deeper. We have to go to the lowest and deepest levels of the masses, the people who are most immiserated, and try to organize them. However, that does not actually mean that in the global South, there's no reason to organize the Lumpen. Now, Fanon said, talking about Africa, right? He said that if you do not organize the Lumpen, the enemy will organize them against you. I think that a lot of people know about like because Fanon, like a lot of his writing, he was doing it in Algeria, right? It's just like, or about Algeria, right? A lot of people have seen the Battle of Algiers or know the story of Ali Panther. Very fantastic movie, one of my favorite films. But that is a very good example of sort of the contradictions that exist between the Lumpen and especially urban areas in the global South, right? During a national liberation struggle, Ali, he was a Lumpen, but he was able to kind of come over to the perspective of the FLN. However, at the beginning, he didn't necessarily have the most disciplined, approach. He had to learn that. But he did have to go against other Lumpen, people who were more like Lumpen bourgeoisie, who were kind of at the top of the food chain when it came to the illegal or underground economy, who would never come over to the position of the FLN. And he had to basically liquidate them. It's just like, so it's just like, but that's an example of the enemy organizing these people against you. And this happens throughout the global South. Right. It's just like, and it's just how it is. Now, I want to say a good book that I would recommend. Jay Sakai has a book that one side is like called the Lumpen-Proletariat, the dangerous class. The other side, it's literally like a book that has two sides. Like you flip it. The other side is called Mao Zedong's Revolutionary Laboratory. And it's about the Chinese Revolution. And in China, like the Lumpen were considered these like floating people, so to speak. These people who, you know what I'm saying, had been forced off their land or who had been forced out of their jobs, who didn't have same thing, basically, as we have in our situation here, where there was no other way to survive but to, you know what I'm saying, deal in the underground economy or to, you know what I'm saying, try to survive through some kind of means outside of the regular legal economy. And so, but a lot of these people ended up in the People's Army or the Red Army of China, at that time, to a degree where there was even a point where like it could even be considered most people that were in it. It's just like, and so that kind of goes to show that it does like make sense to try to like, you know what I'm saying, even in the situation of the global South, to try to organize, you know what I'm saying, these most immiserated people, these people that are part of the Lumpen-Proletariat, people who are part of the underclass, that will be able to be mobilized in order to achieve revolutionary victory and to try to win over those organizations that are composed of people of this strata of society in order to get them to help in the struggle, especially to prevent those people from ending up becoming your enemy. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's just a wonderful point, because I'm just starting to see right now in times of crisis, especially where people are hyper emotional about the things going on in the world, the international conflicts, gas prices going up. Folks are like, yo, what's happening? And all it takes is for somebody to come in from the street, who you think is from the street, but is a CIA agent or whatever, sow that type of discord. And I think that's happening, especially right now. The enemy is aware of people's frustrations because times are going to get rougher, and it's not like in another 2 years, things are just going to automatically improve. I think the more society and the more capitalism grows into this more grotesque monster, we're going to start seeing the more sensitive aspects come to our doorsteps. And yeah, it's best to organize those folks with our political education that is anti-state, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, to benefit the struggle forward. Because I think a lot of folks forget how easy it is to do what you wouldn't think you would do when you don't got nothing. When your material conditions are gone and you're not used to having that, or you're used to having it and then it's just not there anymore, you would be surprised what people would go to. So I think that has to be an emphasized point, because it's not just a matter of even laughing at those who are on the street. Like, it's amazing how folks forget we're just a paycheck away from that. Like, yo, if your job say, yo, we letting you go, you don't got no savings. Most people don't. So like we got to understand that this is a process. Yeah, having that political education and getting to that center is really important. And yeah, Fanon's work, I was reading the bits of the Wretched Earth, and I was just like, oh, this is the type of stuff it needs to be constantly read, because this is a problem that, again, domestically here in the belly of the beast, we thinking we're the only ones, but it's like, nah, folks in Haiti, folks in Algeria, everywhere around the world where imperialism is expanding, they're dealing with that same enemy. So we have to internationalize the struggle to a point where we are aware of this enemy and to fight it.
Yeah, I understand you guys are a Marxist-Leninist-Maoist organization, and I know you alluded to the revolutionary New Africans as well, one being James Jacques Sales. Wanted to know, essentially, do you guys extract various elements of the New African Independence Movement? And if so, is the objective of the organization to create a nation state within the U.S., or is it more of a broader Pan-Africanist lens? If you kind of dive into that a little bit, I think that would be great.
Okay, so I think that like clarification is that I am a Marxist-Leninist Maoist and a New African, part of the New African Independence Movement, or like, it's just like, that's like where I ideologically align, right? But my organization is not necessarily that. Well, I'm part of like two different organizations, one of them being my kind of on the ground like thing, which is CMB, and the other one being Spirit of Mandela, right? CMB is more of like a broader Black liberation type of organization that I would say is like leftist in orientation, that is like pro decolonization, that struggles against gentrification, against food insecurity, all of these things that are like plaguing our people, police brutality, all that kind of different stuff, right? I will say that the founder of CMB does come out of the New African Independence Movement. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean like CMB is like a New African, or it's not like MXGM, right? We also have that here, right? It's different than that. Just like our organization is geared toward trying to basically build up a political base, right? Like, depending on which CMB chapter it is, it's different hoods across the country. The main chapter is the one in Atlanta, and the hood that we're specifically trying to build up a political base in is called Pittsburgh, which is a little bit confusing, but yes, it is in Atlanta. But it's just like, and our whole goal is to kind of build up kind of like a people's power centered institutions to put people in power to the degree that's possible, right, within this particular community, right, pending, you know what I'm saying, further developments, you know what I'm saying, of revolutionary struggle, right? And so, but my viewpoint, right, it's just like, and this is the viewpoint that I espouse when it comes to like any kind of organization that I work in, viewpoint devoted to the idea of the liberation of New Africa, right? It's just like, so of course, I see it as there being captive Black nation that exists here in the United States. I see it as being necessary for us to be able to have self-determination and independence. I don't see our citizenship as part of the United States as legitimate because it was not something that was asked, that we were asked about, really. It's just something that just like, was kind of forced upon us when we were liberated from enslavement. And also like before that, legally, we just weren't considered citizens. So you know what I'm saying? And also like even considered a separate nation by certain like major like political like figures within the United States, like white ones, right? It's just like because we're obviously not the same people as what was considered American, because in America, American basically means white, and as Toni Morrison said, like everyone else has to hyphenate, right? It's just like, so it's just like I have that perspective, and this is a perspective that I agree with through the lens of Marxism-Leninism-Maoism, which is this understanding of, of kind of like a universal revolutionary science, right? That is kind of a guide to revolution, right? For us. So there are a lot of comrades who exist in a variety of different organizations, right? And even organizations that I've been in previously, right? That kind of have that, outlook. But it is important to establish that this is not necessarily the outlook of the organization that I'm in, because it is an organization that's filled with a lot of different elements kind of united by our 10-point program, right? It's just like in a general direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Appreciate it.
I just wanted to ask, as you were speaking about the new Republic of New Africa, or just some of the folks that are here, we interviewed our comrade recently, Bumani, about this, and we didn't get a chance to ask. And you mentioned something that makes me want to ask you, how do you wrestle with, the fact that this is indigenous land and all of this land is stolen? What are some of the collaborations, if any, you've done with community movement building?
Yeah, community movement builders.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
All right. Have there been any relationships there done with any indigenous folks or indigenous organizations, or just some education, speaking to just to the extent of how that obviously affects all of our organizing?
Yeah. So as far as like our political position as CMB, like our whole goal is to kind of like liberate like New African and indigenous people. We are an organization that focuses on Black people, right? It's just like, but it's just like indigenous people are like included, in our understanding of like, it's just like we're struggling for the liberation of colonized people. Like in our understanding of decolonization, that is just automatically there, right? As far as like practical stuff, I do know that like in our struggle against Cop City, members of the indigenous nation that originally lived on the land where they're trying to build this massive police training facility to train for urban warfare against like, all sorts of different colonized people, right? Especially Black people. They came to kind of like help protest against it. And this was something that we had also worked very hard on organizing. So we're out there together, working on that. But like broadly speaking, our goal is, decolonization, and decolonization, like it doesn't even make sense to talk about decolonization without talking about indigenous people. Spirit of Mandela, my other organization, also focuses extremely heavily on the genocides that have occurred in the United States, which definitely include Black people, but you can't talk about genocide in the United States without talking about indigenous people, right? So in our tribunal, which charged the United States with genocide recently, there were a bunch of indigenous speakers that were there. There probably could have been more. It's just like, but it's just like that, like was not something that was missed. As far as the question of like New Africa and wrestling with the idea of like this is like indigenous land, I think that like when it comes to revolutionary struggles in the United States of colonized people, typically New African and indigenous people have worked together, right, in order even to just like try to separate from the United States or to maintain sovereignty from the United States, right? It hasn't been like something that could be considered like like an antagonistic contradiction. It's not the same as the contradiction that, you know what I'm saying, both of us as peoples have against settler colonialism, right? It's just like, and so exactly what occurs, you know what I'm saying, as far as achieving our national liberation remains to be seen. But it's just like, what will be the case is that it will have to be a collaborative effort between New African and indigenous people.
Thank you for that.
How do you see Africa in that role of liberating New Africans here? Or do you see it to be an intrinsic role of Africans on the continent? Do they play a big role in that or no?
I actually think like, okay, like if I were going to make a prediction, right, I think that there would probably be like liberation of like a lot of Africa before New Africa ever even became like a possibility in the immediate future. You know what I'm saying? Because the conditions, again, I was talking about earlier, immiseration, right? It's just like the conditions of peoples in different parts of the world, the core versus the periphery, the first world versus the third world, you know, imperialist countries versus like super exploited nations, right? Africa is the periphery, right? It's just like peoples in Africa have conditions that are so horrific that it also like you can see that like it does produce like larger, stronger left-wing organizations, right? It's just like that are able to like that you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's hard to say what's going to happen, but it could be possible, right? It's just like that, you know what I'm saying, the possibility of contending for state power could occur, right? Like we see what's happening in Abastani, like, you know what I'm saying, like with the monarchy and things like that. It's, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the situation is devolving as time goes on, you know what I'm saying? And devolving for the powers that be in that area, right? It's just like, and the people who sort of adhere closer to like a communist viewpoint, like are kind of gaining strength, right? It's just like, and so I think that it is possible, right? It's just like for this like broad movement to be victorious in Africa, before New Africa is a thing. And I think that there would be like support for, you know what I'm saying, the liberation of New Africa, or at least I would hope so, right? However, it's important for us to like, as like New Africans here, to pursue not a disconnected program from the program of the liberation of Africa, but a program that is like, that addresses like the specific conditions that exist here, you know what I'm saying, so that we can approach, like we can have like a North Star, so to speak, when it comes to our struggle. Because even though we can do stuff to like be against like imperialism, like AFRICOM, things like that in Africa, we have to like, we can't like, unless we like went there and like fought like people's wars on the behalf of our African brethren on the continent, it's like there's only so much that we can do, right? It's just like, so one of the best things that we can do both for Africa and for any oppressed people throughout the global South is to make revolution in our own country, right? It's just like, and so it's just like, I do think that that is necessary as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think even though one thing happened in us, I think in the from Maoist international movement prisons, I think that there was an article about discussing the difference between about Marxism-Leninism, Maoism, and Kwame Tureism. I'm not sure if you read that as well, or if there's anything from that you want to discuss on how they currently the way that they can work in tandem, as far as like for people who are organizing.
Yeah, I actually have read that text. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of differences. Like Maoists typically view like our systems have are working in accordance with like a revolutionary science that is universal, that goes beyond Africa, but like it's just like something for the entire world, right? It's just like, however, that shouldn't be confused with lacking understanding of particulars. You know what I'm saying? Because like we have like particular conditions both on the continent and in New Africa, right? It's just like that have to be taken into account if we're going to make revolution. If they're not taken into account, we won't successfully make revolution, right? So if we don't understand what the specific conditions of like Black people are around the world, it's impossible for us to have revolution, right? So it's just like, it is like that. And we have also our own revolutionary thinkers, our own revolutionary theorists that we need to listen to and understand and study in order to be able to forward the revolutionary movement involving us particularly, right? But it's just like the understanding with MLM is that does not necessarily mean that the science that we are approaching revolution from is not something that is like a global thing, right? So we take Marxism-Leninism-Maoism as being like the global science of revolution. As far as working in tandem goes, I think that it is always necessary. Like as Maoists, right, we believe in the concept of the united front, right? We need to be able to build a broad front. It's just like for the liberation of oppressed people in the area in which we are struggling, right? It's just like, and so that includes as many elements as possible as we can bring in that are, you know what I'm saying, friends. You know what I'm saying? There's the whole concept of who are our friends, who are our enemies, right? It's just like we have to bring in all the friends, you know what I'm saying, so that we can attack the real enemies, right? It's just like, and so it's really necessary for us to focus on that. But that does not mean like unprincipled unity, right? It's just like if we have disagreements, those disagreements have to be in the open. You know what I'm saying? And those disagreements have to be things that are struggled over, you know what I'm saying, so that we can come to the right conclusion. And so that is the whole, that's the perspective, basically.
Yeah, thank you. And we talked is specifically in regards to organizing in prisons and how and the role that would play. I wonder if you could speak more on that and how people, the way people, I know that especially with these so-called most progressive presidential idea or potential platform ever, they're trying to reduce the contact people have on the outside with the people who are stuck inside, and how people can respond and do that for organizing.
Right. So what I can say about prisons is that like it's a difficult thing to do, right? It's just like in like for me personally, in my experience, a lot of that has involved like writing and engaging in the correspondence with prisoners, so that one, like it's important psychologically, like it's just like, especially for people like who are in there and are political, because there's going to be like a lot greater degree of repression for political people in prison because they're seen as dangerous, and rightfully so, just like to the enemy. You know what I'm saying? And that can hurt. You know what I'm saying? Having to deal with that. It's just like, so having that correspondence is really important. One thing that one of the organizations that I've been in before has done is writing with the purpose of kind of revealing or discussing information that or about events that have been going on the outside and getting those inside. You know what I'm saying? Through correspondence. But the thing is, sometimes the state will try to like prevent stuff from getting inside prisons, right? Like certain literature or things like that, and it will be blocked, right? And so it's important to be able to find ways to get around that. For example, like with books, I know like in Georgia, it's necessary to have like books sent directly from a bookstore. And there's a way to get around that, like to say like this is like actually like a publisher or something like that, but it's like actually like your organization or something like that. It's just like it sometimes that's a way to like, you know what I'm saying, kind of circumvent that, but it does cause a difficulty. there are a lot of things that prisoners may need. And if we're talking about meeting material needs of members of the masses, things like dictionaries, you know what I'm saying? Things like study materials that may not even be directly political, but still necessary just for folks to increase their general education, right? Things like that are things that people on the outside can organize in order to get for the masses of prisoners. On top of that, supporting any kind of effort to build like peace inside of prisons between various factions, the prison equivalent of street organizations, it's necessary to do that kind of work too. Although, you know what I'm saying, there is a limit to what you can do from outside to aid in efforts such as those behind bars. I've had comrades that have found out like that people like have been in like serious danger, that people have like, you know what I'm saying, been like threatened by like a rival like faction, right? It's just like, and that stuff is like pretty like, it's sad and horrible to deal with, right? There's only so much that can be done about it, but a lot of times like what can be done is kind of popularizing what's going on outside, because a lot of people don't really know what's going on in prisons. And then also it's just like, it's sometimes necessary to go out and, you know what I'm saying, come out to the prison itself, even if you can't go inside, to just like, you know what I'm saying, make noise, right? It's just like to bring out a bunch of different organizations and peoples from the outside in response to complaints of prisoners on the inside, in order to just kind of like make it known or to rally against the horrific conditions that are existing inside of the prisons. And trust me, like that, the police will not be happy about that, but it is definitely worth it to do it. And it makes the prisoners happy for sure. And there's proof of that. Like, it's just like, you'll see it, you know. On top of that, I think the final thing I can say about that is that like prisons can be like schools for revolutionaries. There are a lot of like very, very advanced people that have come out of prison, right? Exactly. Exactly.
You think of, I'm always inspired, and I always tell folks to read Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, because you want education, and that, I mean, that's a great way to start. I mean, of course, you got Malcolm X and so many other comrades that were in prison that got just radicalized just by reading books. And I think to the point that you mentioned, dictionaries, like, you might not be able to, and obviously they make it very hard to get any type of revolutionary material.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you find to be like most effective for you in organizing the Lumpen-Proletariat? Do you find it's in propaganda? Like if you pass out flyers and people ask questions, is it just walking up to people and talking? Or what do you find to be social media? What do you find to be the most effective tools? Or is it just a bevy of all those things in trying to organize the Lumpen-Proletariat?
Frankly, from like a broad perspective, prison is the best. Because you can't go in there, but that is like a situation in which people have the time to engage with political ideas, and people have kind of like the reason to. Prisons have some of the worst conditions that exist here in the United States. It's just like that is like something that is so bad that it's just like it will like kind of enlighten people to what the conditions are within this current situation, right? It's just like, and then like it's just like such a great place when it comes to carrying out education, right? It's just that because in those particular conditions, you know what I'm saying, you can like, you know what I'm saying, yes, even if it's difficult to get revolutionary material in there, you can, you know what I'm saying, still like try to do that. And you can like oftentimes end up being successful, right? It's like because a lot of people like, as long as you use the right workarounds, it's just like people will kind of be able to get some of those materials that you need to get to them, or you can even write materials that they can see, right? It's just like, so that is one of the best places. Other than that, like it does like require to like walk up and talk to people. Sometimes it's important to find people who organize Lumpen themselves, organizing organizers, so to speak, right? It's just like, so when I was talking about Brother Haroon, like that's a good example of that, where it's just like, getting with him like was important because he is someone who like was organizing people who were kind of like exiting their like status of being like lumpen, right? It's just like, and being able to do that like is one of the good ways of trying to approach that as well, right? So it really just depends. But yeah, I mean, that's basically my assessment on which one is the most effective.
Just for the listeners, and I also want to get into writing political prisoners. Is there some resources you can share where folks can, get involved in writing letters and really engaging those that are in prison? Because as you mentioned, it's some of the worst conditions. Most of us can't even fathom to imagine the food that is served, the treatment, of course, and to have just that one-on-one contact, I think is necessary.
So here in Atlanta, like the Atlanta Black Cross has been a resource that we've used, or in organizations that have been in previously have used in order to be able to contact prisoners. And you can like actually see like, it's just like prisoners that are just straight up like politicized that have their like stuff like published on there, and then like give the information that they need in order to write to them. And then that organization, or it might not be that, I think it's like an adjacent type of like thing that's also anarchist, is they also host letter writings that like help. I don't know if such a thing exists in y'all's area, but I think that just using like, we have the ability to use using the internet today, like using that in order to do research can help you identify certain people that might be worth the contact.
We at least here in New York, we do. I actually been to a few of New York anarchist Black Cross. There's also incarcerated workers committee. There's another group of it. So yeah, there's definitely groups for people to like tap on in transition. And this is a site. This is going back to one of our ancestors, One point about the Lumpen is I think similar to the proletariat, that there is an image of proletariat, especially Western left our left circles of the sort of the European working in the factory. And I think the Lumpen is also another image of it. But we have to remember, I think, there's also a lot Lumpen are also women, people marginalized. There's also people older, younger, and so forth. And we talk more about how understand, like, not only from a national anti-colonial perspective, also an perspective that's the anti-patriarchal.
Right. So like, a lot of like Lumpen are like sex workers. A lot of Lumpen are, women who are like struggling themselves, right? It's just like, and so I do think that it's important not to look at like when it comes to like any strata as it be or class as being like an all male, like stereotypical monolith. Because if you look at things that way, there's no way you're going to get like an accurate conception of how things actually are, right? It's just like, and so there are, and you can make the argument that like for like women's strata of the Lumpen, right? It's just like it might not be, the same like, exact like conditions. Like it's just like the specific like way that they have to survive might be different. It's just like from what it is like typical for the men. Not always. It's just like, but it really does just depend, right? And so it's just important to like just be aware of the differences that exist within that strata of society and be able to address those accordingly.
All right. Well, I think this is a very powerful conversation, and obviously and thank you for all of your answers. You've been very apt at just answering every question, and we appreciate that. Is there any more questions, Evan, you would have, or Sadiq? I think, of course, this type of conversation should encourage everyone who's listening to join an organization to be involved in the struggle, because obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and most folks almost make it seem like it's an impossible feat, but we know that it's possible because it's been done before. And I think just talking with you today, I'm realizing that it's not just about having the information, but really meeting the material needs and talking to folks and really being comfortable with the uncomfortable aspects of it, because it's not always going to be comfortable. You're not going to always have just, streamlined conversations where it's just like, oh, nice. You're going to be dealing with powerful forces, scary forces, dark forces. And so you got to maintain yourself in this thing, but you also understand the reason why we're doing it. So, I think just this conversation encourages one to really remember why this fight has to continue, because the lumpen, like it was mentioned various times in this episode, you look at the prisons, you look at the streets, and there are communities. I like how you also emphasize that it's not like these are gangs, these are community organizing forces that are directly attacking the state. Anytime you do that, you put yourself in a situation where you're more plausible. Speaking just to the point of political prisoners, we also have to remember that, just what we're doing here, we're seeing with a lot of the misinformation with Russia and everything, accounts are being taken down because this is information that the state doesn't want to be widely produced. So we have to, be hands-on with folks and think of, better ways of, disinformation. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to add. Anything else you guys wanted to say, Evan or Sadiq?
No, I appreciate you joining on and putting us on game to the organization. And that's all I have to add.
Evan, you have anything to say? Otherwise, we also like to always remind you guys that we have various other, this is not just the Pantsula Podcast, it's not in a vacuum. We have the For It Ever Podcast.
We also have Our Ancestor Voices, Revolutionary African Women. Those two are on YouTube. So is the A-APRP New Mexico chapter that they do theirs on Thursdays, I believe, as well. We also have our For It Ever shop where you can purchase
where you can see
shirt.
We got the African hoodie and the shirt logo repping the All Africans People's Revolutionary Party. Check it out.
That's it. All right. Well, once again, we appreciate you joining. Yeah, go ahead.
And also check out Black Internationalist, the YouTube channel. A lot of great information, great video essays and interviews there. So check those out.
Yeah, right before we joined the call, I was listening to the episode, and it was, you got to check it out. It's an hour, which is wonderful. I love long episodes with information. I have my I got my notepad. I was just jotting things down. So again, Marte, we appreciate all of your work. You got that sharp analysis, and it's definitely beneficial. So much love and appreciation.
Thank y'all. appreciate y'all too.
Lessons. All right, y'all. Well, remember, organize. That's the only solution. And for it ever.
For it ever.